Hi guys, Jim here, and welcome back to my reptile jungle. Now, recently in the UK, I don't know if you've been keeping an eye on the news, there has been some insane weather going on. We had a very mild winter, and just as we thought winter was over, it hit us like a brick wall, and we have had some winds. We've had down trees, we've had everyone's fences seem to be flying, and I tell you what, it's very cold. Now, I keep reptiles, as you can see here, and these animals, like Bob, this is an Australian animal, they need it very warm, and you know, this temperature outside is no good. So in this video, I'm going to take you through how I keep my animals warm and healthy, and to be honest, some of these things might surprise you. Alright, so stay tuned and let's get to it. Now, believe it or not, I actually keep reptiles outside all year round. In here behind me is my turtle pond, and the species I keep here are American species. These are your cooters, your yellow belly sliders, and your map turtles. Now, where they come from, this weather actually happens naturally. So, as long as you offer them the correct environment, they can escape this how they would naturally in the wild, and you can keep these guys successfully all year round. Now, how you do this is very important. You need to offer them a very deep pond. Now, this here is a 4-foot deep pond, and the lower you go in the pond, you get this constant temperature that even when it's 0 degrees out here and it's windy, it's raining, it's cold, down there at the bottom it's around 4 degrees. So these turtles can actually slow their digestive system down and their metabolism and everything, so they don't have to breathe as much, and they basically go into a brumation or a hibernation underneath the water, and they survive this perfectly fine. And if anything, it's natural and it's healthy. Now, for the majority of my animals, I actually keep them inside heated sheds. So I go through a lot of artificial heating and lighting in order to offer my animals the safest and healthiest way to keep them warm. In here, which is my box enclosure, I use a selection of the different heat sources that you can see behind me. I have halogen heat bulbs, 2 of them, and in the middle I have a ceramic heat emitter. Now, the ceramic heat emitter I can actually set on its own. So at night time, when these 2 basking lights are off, that heat emitter stays on all night to ensure there's always a hot spot for this species. Now, this species likes it very warm, and where it comes from in Ghana, although it can get kind of cool in its burrows and things, you want it to still have an area where it can go to stay warm. It's just a benefit to having them in captivity, really. They never have to stress out about dying, which is great. So that's the aim. That's how I heat these guys in their individual enclosures. Now, every animal I keep has slightly different things. The tegu over in the other shed has mercury vapor bulbs. The snake has, say 1 halogen, and a couple other things have different heat bulbs. And that is the main way I keep and offer the animals heat throughout these cold temperatures, and in the warm temperatures as well, that is. But it's very important to have these sort of measures in place and make sure that the heat you offer these animals is sufficient for both in the summer and the winter, because if you keep them in a shed or anywhere really in a house, the temperature outside can affect the temperature inside the enclosure. So making sure you have the correct wattage bulbs and the amount of bulbs you need is the correct amount in order to offer that constant and healthy temperature for your reptile. Now, it's very important as well to not freak out when it gets too cold, because these guys can actually overheat rather easily as well. So when you do offer them heat, make sure you run it on a thermostat. Now, a thermostat is essentially an emergency cutoff for your heat bulbs. It also acts as a temperature regulator. So if it gets too warm, this turns down, and regulates that necessary heat that you want in your environment. Now you can get different types. I use the Habitat dimming thermostats for the majority of my collection because I use halogens. If you use mercury vapor bulbs, you can't really plug these into dimming thermostats because those bulbs don't really work for that sort of thermostat. However, these thermostats are fantastic for halogens. They're fantastic to regulate that temperature throughout the day and the night. Now what I do during the day is I turn this up to wherever I want it. For instance, this is the leopard gecko enclosure here. I have it set quite high on 32 degrees. Now this means that the basking spot should get to around 32 degrees roughly, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. It depends on where the probe is set. And at night time, I actually twist this down, all the way down to 20 degrees. Now this turns off the bulb, which is what you want to do because it's nighttime. However, if your power goes out in some form of other heating that you might use in your shed, and the temperature goes down to 20 degrees for some reason, this, as long as you've got power to the entire shed, this will come on and keep your enclosure at a 20 degree temperature, which is exactly what you want to happen. And it's sort of a safety measure. It's always better to be safe than sorry, and these are fantastic bits of kit. So I'm just going to turn it up again, and there we are. Now with a shed, you can have the temperatures you need specifically for those animals because you're not living there. It's not your bedroom, it's not your house. However, in the winter time, you need to make sure that your shed is insulated and you have to heat it somehow. Now the bulbs are fantastic for heating, however I would not trust bulbs on its own to ensure that the temperature of the shed stays at the correct temperature. So in order to heat the entire shed up, which in some way might save some electricity and in some ways probably costs a metric ton more, is I use these radiator space heaters. Now these are electric, they plug in, however they are oil based I believe, so these heat up and they do very, very well. In the front shed, which is a 12 by 10 foot shed, I use just one of these. In this 20 foot by 10 foot shed, I use two of them and it heats up the shed to a perfect temperature that you want. Now the key to using these is using them in collaboration with a really well insulated shed. There's no point just using these on their own because the temperature will just go straight out the walls and you'll just have a cold shed and a really hefty electric bill. What you want to do is have a really insulated shed that holds this temperature, so when these guys heat up and heat the whole shed up to the correct temperature, they actually shut off and wait until it gets cold enough for them to turn on again. But that shouldn't be for a long time because the shed's holding that temperature with that proper insulation. Now another tip when heating your shed is actually to use a fan. Obviously heat rises, so what you can do is introduce a fan to circulate that heat round, making sure that you don't have a really hot point at the top of the shed and a really cold point at the bottom of the shed, which is very important to avoid when you have animals that need that same temperature throughout the entire shed be stacked on different levels. So a fan is a really important thing to have, and I turn this on whenever at night and actually creates a nice breeze, which is a natural thing in nature. Animals are in outside areas, and in outside areas you get the wind. So that's it really. That is how I ensure my animals stay nice and healthy during these wet, windy, cold times here in the UK. Anyway, hopefully you found this video interesting, and from me, Lulu the common boa, and every other reptile here in the shed, I hope to see you in another video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Jim's Reptile Jungle. See you soon.